Hey, what's up YouTube? Dan the Fix-It Man. Got another quick video here for you. I'm going to show you how to change your front brake pads and your front brake rotor on a 2018 Toyota Rav4. This happens to be a made in Japan version. Double check with your parts supplier that you might want to enter your V.I.N. Just make sure that you get the right parts. The process will still be the same, but the pads and the rotor are different if your vehicle was manufactured in Japan. Now, the first thing I like to do is push the caliper piston back inside the caliper here so that we have more room for the new pads, which are going to be thicker. Now, before we push the caliper piston back in, it's a good idea to pop the hood. Take a look at your master cylinder reservoir here. You can see down below our fluid level is well below the max, and we have plenty of room to push the fluid backwards up into here without it overflowing and making a mess. A lot of people ask me if you need to take this lid off in order to do that. You really don't. The resistance in the caliper piston doesn't seem to change whether I take that off or leave it on. Brake fluid absorbs moisture, even moisture in the air, and as little as you can expose it to new air, the better. Exposing it to more air and moisture will cause it to degrade and go bad. So I'm going to leave that on while we push the caliper piston back in. Now, there's lots of ways to push this caliper piston back in. I usually like the screwdriver method where you put something in here through this little opening and you just try to catch the edge of the pad and pry. This one's a little steep. I don't know if we'll be able to get in there. If I can't, we'll just take the caliper off and push it back in with the caliper compression tool. Similar method to putting a large C-clamp on here. You can even do it with it still on and push right here and then push that caliper piston back in that way. Now, you can see that I have the wheel turned out to the right because I'm doing the passenger side. It's just easier to get to everything. And I'm just going to use a little pry bar here. This is a little Mayhew Dominator. Sorry, it's a little scratched up, but if you could just put this in through this little window or opening here, you can also use a large screwdriver. And what we're doing is just trying to pull this towards us. That will compress the caliper piston slowly by pulling that towards you. Just trying to catch either the edge of the pad or even the rotor will work. Now, I already did the other side, and these slide pins were really stiff, really stuck. I think that's what's happening here too. It's not so much the hydraulics resistance, but the resistance in these slide pins is really preventing me from easily pulling that over. Yeah, see, this is really stiff. Definitely those slide pins. So I'm going to try to shift this pry bar and try to fit it in between the pads and the rotor here. I just moved this in between the inner pad and the rotor, and then just pull that towards you, and that's going to push that caliper piston back in. There we go. Normally this will slide back and forth pretty easy once you do that, but our slide pins are really, really stuck. Same with the other side. When I took this off, the slide pins were so stiff I had to take them all out and clean it, so we're going to do the same on this side. Now we need to loosen and remove these two caliper slide pin bolts, and these are a 14mm socket or wrench. I'm just going to use a little Milwaukee, zip these off. All right, and then we can take the caliper off. I'm just going to use this little caliper hook or hanger to hang this up. Just put it right up there on the coil spring, and that's nice and clear and out of our way. Now we can pull off the old brake pads. Now, the reason we're doing this, these are not completely worn down, but this has got some issues with the rotors being warped. This car is shuddering and vibrating when braking at high speed, partially because these slide pins are stuck. You can see I can't even spin that. But I think that's our issue, is the slide pins are not releasing, and the brakes probably got a lot hotter than normal and they warped. I also noticed that they're missing the little clip that goes in the top here to hold that in place. So it tells me somebody's been in here and done these brakes once before. You can see they're starting to crack a little bit here on the surface. Possible they didn't use the right kind of grease in the slide pins. Maybe somebody cleaned those and used a regular, like a petroleum-based grease. What happens if you use the wrong kind of grease in there is exactly this. These will get all caked in there and real sticky and gummy. Let's take out the other pad. Yeah, same thing. It's got a lot of surface cracking on there, but not completely worn down. All right, now we can remove the caliper bracket bolts. These are 17mm. You'll need a breaker bar or an impact. This might do it here. Let's see. Let's see if we can fit this one in there. Not quite. Sometimes this wobble reduces the power of this, so it may not take it off here. Let's see. We got lucky. Just kind of want to hold this with one hand as you take that last bolt out so that this doesn't drop. All right, now we can take off the old rotor. All right, if the rotor doesn't just come right off, you can do one of 2 or 3 things. You can just hit it with a Rotor Remover 9000, or you can see we have these threaded bolt holes here. I believe that will take an M8 by 1.25 bolt, and that kind of acts as a press. You can tighten those bolts in there, and it should push the rotor off the hub. A lot of times this works fine, the small Tanya Harding. Let's give it a try here. That got it. Now before I put the new rotor on the hub here, I'm going to clean all this rusty surface off here with just a little wire brush. Just make sure you wear some safety glasses if you're going to do this. This will prevent that rotor from getting stuck on here again. Okay, that's good enough. I'm just going to brush this with a little bit of this Permatex Anti-Seize, and that little bit goes a long way. Don't overdo it. Mostly this little shoulder right here is where I'm concerned about. Just kind of spread that around, and that will prevent that new rotor from sticking on there. You can brush the whole face of this hub if you want to. That looks good. Okay, so we got the new rotor right here. It's important that you clean this off because these are packed in some sort of oil to prevent that from rusting. So I'm just going to set it here for a second. So we're just going to use a little bit of brake clean on this paper towel and wipe that off. And then we'll turn it around. Same thing on this side. All right, now we need to clean up our caliper bracket. Just gonna pry out all the clips and clean this up. And we're gonna pull out those slide pins and clean those too. Just gonna clean the bracket here where the new clips will go because there's a bunch of gunk in there. It's just important that we clean these little channels down there because the new clips need to sit flush inside there. Now I've noticed people are putting some caliper grease in these channels before they put the clips on, more as a protectant against rust or rust jacking. So that's what I'm gonna do. Again, that's just to kind of keep this stuff protected from rusting and keep it from pulling these clips up, because we really need these clips to be nice and flush. So just kind of line those all up and push them in place just like so. All right, those are all in. Just for good measure, let's just hit those, each of those channels with a little bit of this caliper grease. Again, that's just to keep that from binding up. We don't want too much because that'll gather dust. I probably should have done the slide pins before putting some grease on there, but that's all right. We got to get these slide pins out of here, and they are really stuck. See, this is really stuck in there. Hopefully we can just twist that out. Got it. So if you can see that right there, this is not, that's definitely not silicone based grease, and that's why these were stuck. So I like to do these just one at a time. First we're going to clean the slide pin, and it's cleaning up pretty well actually. All right, that's going to work. Now since this is so gummed up in here, we need to clean this out. So I'm just going to pull the boots out and just kind of pull out of that little recess in there, and then yeah, that's just a mess in there. So we're just going to spray some brake clean in there. I finally got some of these brushes to clean these calipers, slide pin recess, I guess we'll call it. So just kind of hit that, clean it. I'm going to put a little bit more brake clean in there. And clean that again. All right, and we'll just dump that out. Hit it one more time. Perfect. All right, I'm still gonna put the old method here. I used to use these little wrapped up paper towels to clean that, and I'm just gonna do that to wipe out any residue in there. You kind of twist and push that as you go. It works pretty well. If you don't have that little brush, this is another thing you could do. Usually I don't do this. This is only because these were really stuck because somebody had used petroleum-based grease, just the wrong kind of grease. I don't know if you can see in there, but it's much cleaner now. Now we just need to clean this boot here too. I don't have replacements of these rubber boots. They do sell them, but Just gonna try to do the same method here. Just kind of pull a rag or a paper towel through here and just kind of spread that all around. Try to wipe out the inside of this boot. Again, I don't usually do this. This is just because this has some caked up grease in there, and we're gonna use the right stuff now. I think that'll work. Now let's just put this boot back in. You can see you just kind of gotta push that little ridge past the edge and just kind of spin that around a little bit. Got it. And then we'll just get some new pretty blue grease here on the caliper slide pin and just put this back in. I just kind of twist it as I go. You feel a little bit of resistance as sometimes air pockets, and you can see that little rubber boot just pops up on the shoulder there. Now this is still wanting to push out, see, because it's got some trapped air in there. So what we do is just push and squeeze that boot, and I can hear it popping. It's almost like burping it, and kind of spin that. Let's burp it one more time. Yep, a little bit more trapped air, just so you can see the difference there. Look, I can just spin that, and we'll wipe off the excess grease here on the outside. But look, I can just spin that easily with my finger. This other one that I haven't done yet, I can't move it at all. It's so stuck. Now I always do these one at a time because a lot of times one of them has that little rubber O-ring or bushing on the end. I believe this one will have it on this one here. And the bad grease causes that rubber here at the end to swell. So I don't know if we can reuse this. We'll see. We'll see how it turns out. We'll just get this all cleaned up. So you can see this little channel in the rubber. In the past, I've cut those a little bit deeper to try to salvage these. Not because they're expensive, just because I don't have them on hand, but we'll see if we can get this to work and push back in without too much resistance or pushing back out. First, we'll clean off the slide pin. It looks all right. I don't know if that bushing is swollen. We'll find out when we go to put it back together. Okay, and then we're gonna take this rubber boot out of here, and then we'll get this one cleaned out. And then we'll pour out the old junky stuff. We'll do the same thing here, just wipe out all of that excess debris and old grease. All right, that is nice and clean now. Same thing on this boot, trying to just clean and wipe out all the old grease. These boots do get old and do need to be replaced every once in a while, but these still feel like they're okay. I don't think that grease caused any damage or anything. They don't look pitted or cracked, and they're still pretty flexible. I think we're gonna be all right. All right, let's get this one back together now. Same thing, just kind of fold and push that little rubber end down there in the little shoulder of the metal. Kind of just gotta push that, twist it a little bit until it sits flush. Yep, there we go. That looks good. Now you don't want to use too much grease. You use too much, it doesn't compress, and that will make it difficult for this to slide all the way in. I'm just going really slow with this one because that rubber is kind of worn out a little bit, but if we can get this to go in and it still moves, yeah, see, it's kind of hung up on the little rubber shoulder here. But if I can push it past that, I think we'll be all right. That's what I was able to do on the other side as well. There we go. We got it. Huge difference. This will work so much better now. Okay, so our bracket is ready to go back on, but what I'm gonna do, you see these caliper bracket bolts? I'm gonna put a little bit of thread lock on here. I'm just gonna use this Permatex thread locker blue. Doesn't take much, about like that. And we'll just kind of roll these together. All right, and then we just hold this bracket up here and get those bolts started. Let's just get these snug. Okay, the torque spec that I found online for these is 72 foot-pounds. All right, now before we put the new brake pads in, I wanted to point out these little clips right here. They go on the end, right like that. The ones that came off of this did not have them installed, but they do come in the box with the hardware, and I double checked, and that's where they're supposed to go. And I also like to put just a little bit of that caliper grease here on the back of this pad, just a really thin coat. It Just kind of helps to reduce some of the vibrations, and there we go. Same thing with the inside pad. Again, these clips go on the top, and just a little thin coat of this. We're not wanting to put a whole lot there. You can attract a lot of brake dust, but for whatever reason, that really thin layer, I know probably it gets so hot some of that just melts off and doesn't stay on there, but it does seem to leave some sort of a residue, and that helps cut down on some of the vibration that happens with brakes, and that's what causes noise. So let's just do the same thing here. Just kind of put this in at a little bit of an angle. There it is. That's a little tricky. You kind of just have to angle it and pull, and then just double check that these little clips at the top are centered, that they're not going to bind up or anything. That looks good. You don't want to put any grease on the rotor or on any of the friction surfaces of the pad. If you do, just make sure you try to clean it off. But now we can put the caliper back on. Let's just take this hook off, and then just carefully put that over the pads, like so. And we don't put any Loctite on these bolts. Let's just get those started. I'm just gonna snug these up with this real quick. And the torque spec that I found online for these is 25 foot-pounds. And you're done. Before you drive off, it's important that you step on the brake pedal several times. Don't press it all the way to the floor. That can damage the seals in the master cylinder. Just press it down several times, about halfway, until it feels firm. And what that's doing is pushing this caliper piston back out and pressing those brake pads up against the rotor where they need to be. Also, you need to double check the fluid level in your master cylinder. Make sure that that's at the appropriate level before you head out. I hope you liked the video. Please give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you don't mind. That does help me out. I'll get a link in the description to some of the parts and tools used in the video as well. Thanks so much for watching, and good luck.